If during the webcast you have any questions for Justin and Ismael, please enter them into the questions window located on the GoToWebinar interface at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to Justin.
Thanks, Jessica. So today we're going to be talking through the journey to becoming an all-around defender, kind of what that means, and we're going to wrap our head around why a three-part series. Personally, I think this is going to be one of the most fun methods of sharing how to become good at a little bit of everything. We have a lot of ground to cover in 3 webcasts. So real quickly, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Justin Henderson. I am the author of SEC 555 Sim with Tactical Analytics. I'm also a co-author with Ismael here of SEC 530 Defensible Security Architecture and Engineering, as well as I co-author with John Hubbard SEC 455 Sim Design and Implementation. I have 61 industry certifications. The one I'm the most proud of would be the GSE number 108, booyah, as well as Cyber Guardian, blue and red, which means I can do a little bit of offense and defense. So, and over to you, Ismael.
Thank you, Justin. So, yeah, I was really excited about this webinar. We're going to explain the reasons why in a second. I'm not going to go through all my certifications because it's impossible to beat you, right? So I thought I had a lot of certifications until I met you. It's like, okay, I'm not going to talk about that, but hey, you know, we shared GSE, right? So that's cool. I've been doing security for about 20 years now. And this is what this is about, right? Sharing some of the experience and the things that we have gone through. Not that, you know, it's the only way to get, you know, to the things we're doing today. We're going to talk about that too, but maybe some of these experiences can help you. You can find us on Twitter over there. My day-to-day work, I've been working for McAfee for about 9 years. I'll explain a little bit of that and the different things I've been doing. And I'm co-author with Justin in Security 530, which is a lot of what we're discussing here today is based on also our process for creating the material and sharing the material with many of you. So why are we doing this? And you know, here we're going to talk together about the why we're doing this. To me, it's over the years I've had a lot of people asking, how do I get to security? How do I start in security? But to be honest, I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe even up to 5 years ago, most of these questions were from people that, hey, I want to learn how to hack, right? Because hacking is fun. And for the last few years, what I've been telling to a lot of people is, look, hacking can be fun, but if you actually make of that your day-to-day job, it can be boring, right? And obviously, we're talking about penetration testing, ethical hacking, right? As a consultant, it could be fun, but it could also be boring. And I've learned over all these years that what really carried for me, what really made me excited about doing security was helping to defend organizations. So I'm so pumped, I'm so happy that in the last few years, we see a lot more people interested in blue teaming, right? How do I become a defender? And in the process of, you know, running this class, Justin and I, we came up with this concept, right? The all-around defender. It's like, look, you have to know a lot of things, but how do you get to know that without dying, right? In the in the process. That's what this is about.
You know, forgetting who your children are, you know, minor things.
Exactly. How about you, Justin? What?
Yeah, and it's like, to me, like if you look at the cybersecurity job pool, like whether you're already in it or you're trying to enter it, because there's a lot of folks entering cyber defense right now, most of the jobs are defender positions, but they're not just defender positions, they're kind of the general practitioner. Like you have to be doing a little bit of everything. Now don't get me wrong, you're probably going to get hired into a title or position specific to something, but once you get in that job, all of a sudden your hats start changing. You're like, oh, I'm doing vulnerability scans, now I'm securing Azure and Amazon, now I'm going into this containerization. Oh, now I have to secure and do networks and flows and maybe SDN and fire. Like, holy cow, we have so many responsibilities. it's overwhelming, but it's also like the perfect time to get in this industry. Even with all the nasty craziness going on with COVID right now, cybersecurity is a hot topic, and being a defender, wow, like your odds of being a successful career, this is the industry to do. So this is a 3-part series. Ishmael and I are really excited about this because we want to share with you the steps we took and things you can do to become a good all-round defender. Be good at a lot of things, jack of all trades, maybe not a master of something specifically, but to really go far with your careers. So what are we talking about in part 1, Ishmael?
So this part is about how we get to do the things we're doing, right? And it's not about saying, hey, you have to do this way. This is more, we have a few slides. Justin's are way better than mine, but we just want to talk about our experience, right? And sometimes when we teach, I think we go off track a little bit, but here I guess like, hey, we're gonna go off track a lot. We're just gonna share how we got here, the things we've done, things that worked, things that didn't work, and hopefully we can inspire some of you to either accelerate, right, improve your career in security, and maybe looking at things in a different way, different angle. We're taking new challenges, or it's maybe things you can do at home, and we're going to talk about that in the future series.
Part 1, we're sharing our journeys, and I would say we're also demystifying. We didn't just magically wake up and like, I'm not a genius. Ishmael, I think you're really smart. I'd say you're probably smarter than me. But for me, it was a lot of small incremental steps, and hopefully this will make sense as we hit the slide. So part 1 is our journey to demystify that, no, we're not special. We just, here's what worked for us. Here's what didn't work. Part 2, part 3, we're going to show you how to do your own enterprise home labs with even cloud solutions without breaking the bank. So stay tuned for that. With this, we're going to jump into part 1. I'm going to turn this over to Ishmael so he can share his journey, and then I'll catch up with y'all here at the second half.
Thank you, Justin. And yes, it's not about being smart. I don't consider myself smart. I think I'm persistent, right? So the same way that we talk about APTs, right, attackers being persistent, it's important that if you really like something, that you're persistent, right, and that you focus your energy as well on improving a little bit of at a time, and that's what we're going to be discussing here. So my slides are going to be like mostly placeholders for me to tell you some stories, share some stories with you. I remember when I was in college, I think it was the second year in college, and as you can tell based on my accent, I'm not here from the US. I'm from Malaga, a small town in Spain, southern Spain, where most of the industry is based on tourism, right? So nice beaches, restaurants. Think about a lot of places in California by the shore. So pretty much the same. And there's some IT, some interesting also security companies that we'll mention later on in the webinar. But I remember that day walking into college and seeing this sign that said, if you understand this, we will hire you. And you know how we like challenges, right? We like solving puzzles. We like saying, hey, I can do that. That's hard. I can understand that. So it turns out that as I was going through, college, yeah, it was interesting, right? I really liked certain things like programming. I love to do that. And I was programming, in assembly and in C and in Pascal, in Modula, and a lot of other interesting languages. Yeah, I learned COBOL too. But I spent some time at home going through, the internet and trying to find manuals on things. Like, for example, I wanted to build my own Apache box, right, and learn ASP or PHP. So when I actually saw that sign, I could read that there was PHP code, there was ASP code, and I was doing a select of like database. And I didn't learn that at college yet, but I like to do my reading. I wanted to learn more, and I went home and I did all these things. So I told my buddy that was coming with me, look, I know what's going on there. He was like, hey, go on and put your resume through the company. And I was like, no, I'm studying. I just wanted to finish my studies. But then as I went back home, I was like, why not? And that's what I did. I put my resume together. Obviously, I didn't have any experience, but I told them about the things that I did at home. I told them about the things that I learned. And guess what? I received a reply saying, hey, can you come back and interview with us? And it was a very little company that was a startup. They were starting a project called topfootball.com. And yeah, the football that you play with the foot, actually, right? The one we play in Europe. And it was interesting because it gave me the opportunity to start coding in Cold Fusion. I didn't know anything about Cold Fusion, but hey, I learned it, right? And I started to learn about a lot of other things. And eventually I started to work administrating the systems that I was putting the code on, right? So this is about 1999, 1998, yeah, about 98. And I was the only one that knew a little bit about operating systems. And again, it was something that I was doing at home, right? So I ended up managing this NT4 box, and I was running the web service on that. And obviously, I was interested in security, right? I didn't want anybody to break into my computers. And I learned all of this outside of school, just reading books, going through things on the internet. Now, if you look at what I was doing a couple of years before, even in high school, I learned about this book, and this is a shameless confession. I know a lot of people think this is really lame, and it maybe is. But as one of the things that I learned when I was in high school, I was reading this and I was like, wow, this is really, really cool. The Happy Hacker Guide, right? The guide to mostly harmless hacking. And you can see how it was like harmless hacking, because this was about how to forge email, right? Now this is so spectacular. You're hacking, you feel like a hacker. What you're doing is actually connecting to port 25 on an SMTP server, right? And crafting emails and sending them through Telnet. But I feel like, wow, I'm so elite, right? I'm doing something so cool. I didn't know at the time, I didn't realize, but what this allowed me was to actually learn how protocols work, what runs on each of these different ports. And it's still a gap that I see today. Like, a lot of people learn products, and that's fine. Hey, I work with products on my day-to-day work, and you need those products in especially corporate environments. But there is no substitution to building things by yourself and then looking at how the technology works. How do the protocols work? What's happening under the hood? What's going through the cable? That's what fascinated me back then, and still fascinates me, and what always motivated me to learn more, right, and to knowing more. So even though this was, a little bit lame, but it helped me to see, okay, this is what Telnet does, right, and how it works and how you connect to ports. Now, at that time at the university, since I'm, somebody that can actually stand just still and just do one thing, I have to do like a lot of things at the same time, which sometimes is a problem. But more on that later. I joined this group of people at the University of Malaga that they had this group. It was HACK, UMA was the acronym for the university. And it wasn't about hacking, again, nothing illegal, obviously. It was just a group to learn about hacking, to learn about offense, to learn about security. And we would write articles, we put the articles out there on the internet. This was led actually by a friend of mine, and that I ended up actually hiring when I set up my own company in the year 2000 in Malaga, a consulting firm. But the long story short, we started to put some of these things out there, links, manuals, how to do things. Eventually, this became part of a book written by my friend, and this was like very popular back in the day, not only in Spain, but all across South America, obviously written in Spanish. But all of these things that we did early in the day, right, early in the 2000s, it was very useful for what would come later. In fact, about that time, when I started to work in this company that hired me, right, because I call them because of this, if you understand this, we will hire you. I started to work with them part-time, just in the mornings, and in the afternoons I would continue going to college and getting my degree. And the thing is, I remember this day when somebody from that group at the university, this hacking group, right, sent me a text and said, hey, there is this vulnerability in the town hall, in Malaga's town hall, in the website. And they're talking about this vulnerability, which in the end it was just a problem with the indexing, right? So it was a hosted server that hosted multiple websites. They made a mistake with the indexes. So when you would go to the website of the town hall, you could find things that belong to other servers. That wouldn't be a problem, that much of a problem, if some of those servers were, let's say, they had a dubious reputation, right? And content that was not very appropriate. So that would show up on this, official website. That was a problem. But out of curiosity, I was doing something else, and then I was like, hey, let me have a look at, let's see what happens with this server. And this is 2000, but the end of 2000. And I realized they have, all these ports open to the world, including port 1433 TCP. And again, based on what I was doing on my own, setting up my labs, and I was learning a little bit about all these things, and I managed a SQL box at that organization. So I knew this was MySQL. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but back in that day, MySQL shipped with an account that was SA, System Administrator. Imagine what the password was by default, right? No password. Password was blank. A non-blank password is highly recommended, but not enforced. It wasn't mandatory. So what most people did back in the day, and a lot of people still do these days, is just click on, next, 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 next. Some people actually would create an additional user with an additional password, but they would forget about removing this one, right? So you could still connect as long as the port was open through this user SA blank password. Now, once you would do that, it would be very easy to do a lot of other things. For example, a lot of these SQL boxes back in the day shipped with something called XPCMD shell. That was a stored procedure that would allow you to run commands on the SQL server, right, itself. So through that port, you could do like a lot of things. Long story short, once I saw that, I called my friends. I knew that they knew people that were managing those servers at the town hall, and I said, look, please lock this down. This is a huge vulnerability. You have these ports open up to the world. Funny enough, they ended up calling me directly saying, how do I fix this? Right? The system administrator didn't even know how to fix this. Like, well, how about you put some rules in front of your firewall, right? In your firewall, so you can prevent everybody from accessing this. And it ended up in a big mess. That company was sued by the town hall, saying that they were hacked by hackers. Journalists came and interviewed me. I shared everything I knew. It's like, hey, this is all I did, and I called them. I found the vulnerability. I reported it. Right? We didn't even talk about responsible disclosure back then, but that's what I did, right? And long story short, the owner of the company, that little company I was working with, building this top football website, and that I was managing the servers for and doing all this coding in Cold Fusion, he came to me and it was like, hey, you seem to be good at this. Do you want to start a business with me? And I was like, what, 23 or something like that? And I was like, wow, starting a business. It's like, yeah, you don't have to do anything. I'll give you the facility. We have facilities here. We have an office. I will take care of all the business side. I just need, your experience, my experience, right? Of 6 months or a year working for this company. And I think we can offer security services to organizations. And back in that day, in the 2000 year in Spain, there were not many organizations doing this. I could only name 1 or 2 that were doing this back in that day. So that's how it started. That's how I set up my own consulting firm in the year 2000, 2001, end of 2000. I called it G2 Security. We were in the local newspapers and things like that. And we had a website. One of the first things I started to do was to realize that we had to share knowledge, right? That this wasn't rocket science. And it was more about applying the fundamentals, right, in a way that would make sense. And those fundamentals are still so valid today. It's about the network, right? It's about knowing operating systems, Linux, Windows, right, or Unix in general, knowing about applications, know a little bit about coding, right? all of these things are very important. And when you approach that not just with a technical mindset, but also with some strategic mindset, you realize, well, this is what business needs. So that's what we started to do. You can see that article. The friend of mine that I had at the university, and he was with me when we saw that sign. He was like, hey, you should apply for this. He started to work with me. He started to help me out because I was, it was just me working out of my consulting firm. He started to help me out, and gradually, as I was getting some business, I was able to hire him. It's funny because he's actually now running the technical laboratory for a huge company called Telefonica. You may know him, right? Sergio de los Santos. He's very well known, not only in Spain, but outside that, he's been doing talks at DEF CON and Black Hat, and he manages the whole security lab for Telefonica out of a company called 11 Paths, right? Which you probably know. And we started to work together, right? Back then, a lot of the people that I actually started to work with back in that day, they also hold like very high positions either in companies or they run their own businesses in security successfully. And nothing really special. We just started to do these little things, and eventually, right, step by step, you realize that you're doing something. It's like, wow, this is useful, right? Around that time, and this was one of the biggest projects that I did. This is funny. Sometimes I've told this in some of my classes, or some of you might have seen this. This was the year 2001. Since I lived in a very small city, I went out to big companies in Madrid, Barcelona, especially Madrid, to offer my services. And long story short, the first call that I got was to assess the security of one of the biggest agencies in the government. And they wanted a report in 3 days because they were being hacked. That's what I was told by the Chinese government, right? So imagine that, probably my first engagement, right, out of my company as a consultant, and I need to go and hack into one of the largest networks in the country. It turns out that this network wasn't owned, right, directly. It wasn't a targeted attack. This was Code Red. You guys remember that? Code Red. This was 2001. It was a worm that infected Solaris boxes to infect Internet information servers. But at the end of the 3 days, I was able to compromise the entire environment, right? Was able to give them a full report. But I was so insecure throughout the whole process, to be honest, right until when I found the machine that was vulnerable, that wasn't on all the time. And that happened in the very last day where I had to turn over the report. Up until that day, my feeling was, I suck, right? This is so, this is gonna be my first project and my last project, right? And eventually, the only thing that saved me, you know what it was? Persistence. I didn't get any sleep during those 3 days. I just like went after it. I scanned every single thing until I actually found the only system that gave me access to the entire network. Wasn't technically challenging? Absolutely not, right? But I guess that where others maybe would have given up, I just kept going. And eventually, a company started to grow. We sold it to a bigger company. You can see here some of the early articles we would write in 2002, 2003. We had thousands of people subscribe to that. Actually, Sergio as well, he worked for a company that built something that you probably know, right? Virus Total, company based out of Malaga as well, my hometown. And as you can see, right, a lot of these projects that are actually really big today, they come from small things that one day you just did. And it was like, you know what? I don't think this is going to be useful to anybody, but I'm going to put it out there. And then people start to use it. And it's like, wow, that's cool. And I have this, right? Everybody has this. And I'm pretty sure Justin has this as well. This feeling that we call the imposter syndrome, where we say, you know what? I actually know this so little. I know so little. I've done this. This is not worthy, right? Little script. Why would I share this with anybody? This is not useful to anybody else. But you realize that in reality, you know things that other people don't know because nobody have the same experience, right? Yes, you've learned things through maybe formal education, maybe going through trainings, right? SANS training, But then what really makes you different is that you have skills that other people don't have, and you have an experience that other people don't have. You have qualities that other people don't have, right? Some people might be good speakers, but they may be, really bad at, I don't know, doing other things. And you might be the other way around. So when you realize that and you start collaborating with others, which is key, you realize that, oh, I bring something unique. So don't be afraid of sharing what you know. That little one thing that you may think it's not worthy, it's not good enough, might make a huge impact on somebody else. And it can make a huge impact in your career as well, and the things that you're able to do. I'll share an experience with you. I joined McAfee in 2011. I joined the Foundstone team, right? Because when I got called by them, I sold my company right in 2001 to another consulting, bigger consulting firm. I ended up, leaving that and joining a company that did software for healthcare for about 6 years, which allowed me to learn a lot about security operations. I learned a lot from other people, how to manage large networks. And I kind of built a security operations team for them with a lot of open source software. Right? I started to use, things like this wheel and many others that we teach today at SANS, even way before we had something like Security Onion, right, where you had to build all those scripts by hand. And in 2011, I got a call from some folks very well known in the industry because I was, teaching for SANS, and they were like, "Hey, that's we're building the Foundstone team in Europe with people to do incident response and forensics. I see that's one of the fields that you do. Would you like to join us?" And I thought, wow, this is a place where I can learn more, right? This is a place where I can learn from the forefathers of this industry, incident response, right? People like George Kurtz, like Stuart McClure, Richard Bailey, right? A lot of Kevin Mandian, a lot of these folks came from that organization. So I joined, and it was, a huge fun that I had over years doing a lot of incident response over the Middle East. This is where you are actually in the trenches, right? And there's no better training than that, and being in the trenches, seeing the greatest and the latest, but it can also be very expensive from a personal point of view. And I'll be totally blunt with you, right? It came to a point where it didn't work for me. It didn't work for my family. Like being able to travel that much, being on a plane every day, it was too much. So I had an opportunity to come to the US in 2014 to set up and work, build the security operations of the largest healthcare organization in the US. And 27 public hospitals. It was very humbling to see how all of the things I did for a lot of companies as a consultant, now I had to do that myself, right? As a not full-time employee, I was still working as a consultant, right? But augmentation stuff, being full-time at this environment, now I had to manage all of this. So I approached that with, okay, I need to learn a lot. But I have good ideas, and I want to do these things, but I want to do them from a perspective that will allow me to scale, that will allow me to run these continuous monitoring or operations and incident response tools on a regular basis, on a daily basis. So long story short, I built a small project. I called it Rastreador, and then I realized most people cannot pronounce that, which comes from hunter or tracker in Spanish. And it was one of these things that it was very simple. I put it together in 3 days. It worked for me. I shared it with the customer, worked for the customer too. And then I talked to my boss, and he was like, I asked him, it's like, hey, I did this. I think, I would like to share it, but I think it's so silly, right? It doesn't really do anything really that, it's not even good code. It's just, a bunch of Python code here and there. He said, look, this is what we do, right? We learn from others. We also share back. We share back with the community. So I put it out there. Before I knew it, there was a lot of people forking the project, cloning that. I was invited to talk at the first summit shortly after being here in the US, talking about the project. And eventually I was even asked to present at Black Hat. I had the opportunity to present actually the project twice at Black Hat in 2016 and 2018. And I'll tell you what, I never thought, this little thing would give me so much in my career when it comes to the opportunity to go to events. At the events, you meet people, right? You have good context. It helps you to grow professionally and also personally, right? So that was a lesson learned. Don't be intimidated, right? Even if it's a little thing, go and share it. And to finalize a couple of slides here, one of the things I see now going backwards, right? If you ask me what worked for you, there's a number of things that worked and a number of things that didn't work, but one was definitely persistence. But don't try to follow somebody's tracks and saying, oh, this is what this individual did. By all means, don't follow what I did. Right? Find your own path. There's always a lot of possible paths. When I had my own company, and at some point I felt like this is not taking me anywhere, I just dropped it. And I'll tell you what, I didn't actually make even money out of that. And I joined this other organization. It was a large organization. I started as an InfoSec specialist, right? No rank, little role. And I remember the people would ask me, it's like, well, so do you have a company? What are you doing here? Why are you doing this? It's like, I don't care about roles. I felt like I wasn't learning anymore. I want to keep learning. So it took me out of my comfort zone. I started to work, it was a British company. Now I had to work with people that sometimes I didn't actually understand. It took me a while to understand my own boss. That's scary. But it took me out of my comfort zone. It forced me to learn new things, to think in different ways, to open up the way I thought about things. And you do it as well as you work with other cultures. I had the opportunity at that company to work with all of the countries in Europe. I had operations in India. I ended up traveling to Asia as well. And then I realized, like, wow, they see things differently. Can you learn from what the things that how they think or how they approach problems? And that's always been a huge thing for me, right? Trying to always be a team player and being humble, realizing that you don't know everything, right? Because we don't really. And there's a lot of other people out there that know so much more on other areas that you can learn from, and they can learn also from you. So it's not that much about the path. It's about the people you find along. And there's something that is really important. Be appreciative. Be grateful. None of us, we have just like, oh, we're doing this. I'm, a senior whatever, or a director, or I'm, a science instructor of whatever. We've all done these things because somebody took the time to help us, gave us an opportunity, right? And then you have to do your part. But be grateful. We're not here. Nobody has done anything great without relying on others. So be grateful. Try to learn from this, from everybody, really, right? And that's been one of the highlights of my career. I've been able to work with people that this is one of the things I really appreciate the most. When you work with people like Justin, or people that I work my day-to-day work, and the SANS fellows, and you talk to them, and they don't introduce themselves like, oh, I'm a SANS fellow, or I'm a VP of this or a VP of that. It's just like a peer. And then you realize sometimes in some cases, like, oh wow, so this guy is the guy that did this or did that. To me, that's awesome, right? And I think that goes a long way in preparing yourself, putting yourself in a situation where you can learn more, right? If you start very high, it's very likely that you will miss a lot of things. But if you start, from a more humble position, recognizing that there's a ton more you can learn from others, that's how I like to approach it every day. But we have to be balanced, right? And I tell you what, that's one of the hardest things to do in this industry, being balanced. Why? Because there's so many things. Work will never end. And now, especially in this situation, I don't know about you guys, but it is so stressful, so stressful. So just to finalize, I'm not gonna bore you with this, set limits and realize that in order to be successful at what you wanna do, right, and at your, as a professional, you also have to be successful at balancing things in your life. I have I'm so lucky and I have the privilege of having a loving family, a great wife that actually she's always reminding me of all of these. She shared with me this article, right? The circle of life. I don't know however you want to call it, but it essentially tells you that you need to balance all of these things. And yes, there's no substitution that to stopping a little bit, breathing, having a nice meal, spending some time, even if it's now through Zoom or whatever, right, with friends or with family, stopping a little bit and also giving, right? Not just receiving, but giving to people. You're always in a position where you can help somebody. When you start focusing on how I can help other people, you also start forgetting about the bad things that are happening to you, and you start focusing more on the blessings and the positive things that you have. And that's always been very important to me, and it's not just about work. All right, so Justin, on to you.
All right. So I love hearing Ishmael's story, because in my mind, as he's talking, I'm just thinking like, that was not my path. And if you talk to other folks in IT, you'll realize we all have different journeys. And I think what happens, kind of going back to imposter syndrome, is we look at these people, like for me, it would be like Eric Conrad, Seth Meisner, like some of these other folks that once I learned, about them, how awesome they were, like we put them up on a pedestal, and then we sit back and be like, yep, I'm never going to reach that. And my slides, I'm trying to get you out of that. I personally believe anybody who wants to get from A to B, whether that's, a SANS instructor or a high paid salary, or I just want to be able to have balance with, like, I don't care what your goal is, but I think you can achieve it. And I'm hoping I can take kind of my journey into IT and kind of share it as a case study. I'm going to try to step back, because I personally don't think I'm that awesome. I was told at one point that I would never make it as a SANS instructor. And to be honest, that was fuel for me to push through, because talking in front of people, like, this is easy for me because you're not here. But speaking in front of an audience was never, and still is not, comfortable for me. Let's just keep it real. It doesn't come natural to me. Walking in and just being like, I know everything, that's not me. There's a lot of things I don't know. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The longer I'm in this industry, the dumber I actually feel. But I know that's not true, because I know now more now than I ever did. So why do we feel that way? And I'm going to use my life kind of story as this. The picture here is me with my family, my 2 kids, my wife, and these were our baby miniature cows, because I live on a hobby farm. I routinely step away from the computers. I have miniature horses, miniature donkeys, full-grown horses, geese, cats, dogs, chickens, rabbits. I have a lot of animals. And that's because I wanted to. I'm in IT because I wanted to. I'm the kind of person that I like to think out like a 1 year and a 5 year, here's what I would like to be at. But I don't, if I don't get there, I don't get there. But I set that target and I aim for it, and I always have. But before I went to college and went into computers, you would have heard me say things like, I'm not going to work in IT. I don't see the point. Like cybersecurity, let's not even mention that, because I didn't think that was a thing. I mean, I just honestly didn't. When I was younger, my brother, he's 3 years older than me, he was always into computers. He was great at it. People all knew him as the IT guy. He went to work for the Pentagon, owns his multi-million-dollar company now. Like I love my brother. I'm so proud of him. But growing up, I didn't want to be the younger brother in his shadow. And I was like, I'm really good with computers, but I don't want to compete against my brother, because he's awesome and I think he'll win. And it's kind of funny, because you'll hear him, if you ever talk to him, say kind of the same thing in reverse, because we both ended in IT and we're both really good at what we do at, but we don't compete. We just kind of share. By the way, my brother hears this, I love you. But I grew up on a farm. I'm a hard worker, but I originally went to school, I signed up for pre-med. And then I realized that I don't like blood. I don't know what I was thinking. So I switched, I actually set my college back because I went to the wrong program being stupid because I wanted a stable career. Well, then I switched to business because I was thinking, maybe, maybe I'll do something different, open a small business, something. And then I realized I'm being dumb because I am really good with computers and people keep asking me to help them, clean up their viruses and reload their machines and build these and help with. It's like, well, I'm good at that and I enjoy it. I'm being dumb. And so then I went back to IT and off I went. So what I did is I actually took a timeline of my life and kind of things that I did, because as I was writing this webinar, I wanted to kind of figure out how can I share what this looked like without over dramatizing it. Like, I'm not up here. I actually felt the whole time I was down here. I ended up being very successful in my opinion. But what did that look like? And let's be frank, at the age of 13, I was already contracting with my older brother. He, not me, would go around to local businesses like insurance companies, small, like just small businesses in our area. And he'd be like, yeah, you don't have anybody to help you with your computers. We can set up Active Directory and what's us, patch systems, and we can install updates to your, insurance software, whatever it is. And then they pay like, $300 a month, which is really good money. And he was like, hey, this is more work than I can handle. Do you want to help? So this was not me looking for money or IT. This was him just be like, hey, do you want to do this? I was like, I don't know how to do those things. Like, yeah, I don't care. You'll figure it out. And it's like, okay. Like $100 to a 13-year-old is like, that's some big money. So at a very young age, I was in computers. Like, I was rolling domain controllers, DNS servers, DHCP, what's us, like file servers, and it was kind of cool because it totally stretched me out of my comfort zone. I had no clue what I was doing, but I learned very quickly from my brother, and that got me in the field. At 16, I was washing trucks. That was my that was my 20 to 30 hours a week because I was still in school, and I'm washing trucks for a living. And you know what? I'm proud of that because I ended up being a supervisor back then, and they had where if you could wash trucks at a certain speed and you sold like extra services like wax and things like that you would have at a car wash, that you could bonus. And so all of a sudden in my mind is, well, if I'm going to work, X hours, it would make sense if I could bonus, 50% because I'm making time and a half, and I have to be here anyway. And so I started learning like bonus equations at working for Blue Beacon Truck Wash. And that was a good job. It wasn't ultimately where I would want to be for my career, but for being a 16-year-old, go for it. And off and on, I would fix people's computers. Like nothing overly like, if you're like, yeah, how did Justin become a SANS instructor? Yeah, he fixed Windows XP and yeah, no. Like it's basic menial tasks, but as a 16-year-old, I could do it. And so I made, $50 here, $100 there, nothing spectacular. Still know how to do some things that a 16-year-old normally doesn't, like DC promo and stuff like that, but I wasn't doing those. So at 18, well, at this point, I'm still washing trucks, but I opened a side business doing virus removals and, a few minor services for businesses, again, domain controllers, file servers, things like that. Nothing at a big scale. And I'm trying to de-hype this because you're talking maybe 10 hours of work a week. This is where I opened a company. I called it Tech Refresh. You'll never have heard of it because it doesn't matter. It wasn't some big splash in the atmosphere. There was nothing special about it. By 19, I got my first IT job, and it looked like this. Hey, younger brother, the company I'm working for needs a web designer, and I told them you could do it. Like, oh, thanks. I've never coded in HTML before. Yeah, I know, but you can figure it out. And it's like, seriously, I don't know if I should accept a job for something that I've never done and know nothing about. I was like, yeah, but I mean, you figured all that other stuff out, so I told him you can figure it out. Do you want the job? Yes or no? Okay. I said yes, and I was worried that I was going to get fired because I couldn't do the job well. And well, I just learned it as I went, picked up a book because back then the internet was not very good, and I figured it out and made it work. And so 19, that was my first job. By 21, between 19 and 21, that job, they hired me as a web designer, and after a few months, when the site was done, they technically didn't need me anymore. But it's a small, like I live in a rural area, so they weren't going to fire me. So they just said, kind of, well, figure out what you want to do. And I'm the type of person, when I'm bored, I don't go playing games and watching Netflix. Like, I feel like I'm being paid. So it was like being a paid researcher, because all I did was, well, print servers. Let's that company had a multi-force Active Directory, even though they were a really small company. I was like, that doesn't make sense. Let's collapse that back down into single domain, single force, and fix the issues we're having. Let me migrate Exchange 5.5 into 2003 and later 2008. And like, I did these things because I was bored and I had no clue what I was doing. But I had machines and hardware off to the side, and I'd spin them up and I'd test and I'd deploy, and off I went. At 21, I changed into a network engineer job because it paid a couple grand more, really small scale. I still live in a rural area. Like, I'd never moved to the city chasing the big dollars. This company, switches, routers, firewalls. It was a networking job, very different than what I had before. And at this point, I was like, well, historically, I've just figured stuff out. I'm sure I'll continue to figure stuff out. And I never lied. I was always, here's my past. Here's things I've done that are pretty amazing, but I've learned how to figure it out. I'm heavily interested in this position, and I will learn this for you. And they trusted me, and I did what I promised. Again, though, that job, they didn't have enough to keep me busy. So in my free time, since I was the network guy now, I was like, throw in promiscuous mode, throw in a tap. What's this thing called snort? Oh, and it's an IDS? That looks cool. Oh, what's this thing called honeypots? That looks awesome. And I goofed off. I was being paid to be there, so the rest of my team was sitting there watching movies and goofing off, and I was like, nah, ethically that feels wrong. And I learned how to deploy IDSs and tune them and deploy. I would Nmap scan the environment, and I would take the fingerprints and feed it to HoneyD to emulate the environment. Like, I was having a blast, but I was just constantly banging my head against the wall. At 25, I did some contract work for a company. It was another Microsoft Exchange migration. And they're like, wow, you know how to do this. We'd really just like to hire you. And I was like, okay. From there, I ultimately became their systems and security architect, and I was there for quite some time. And they were paying for certifications and things like that for me. And I love that job. I continued to grow. There was more people to work with. And at 27, I took my first GX exam. Yes, I'm a SANS instructor. Yes, you're probably thinking I'm pushing SANS. And that's fine. I'm just going to tell you straight up, at the time that I took my first GX exam, I had 50-something certifications. I had never taken a SANS course, never taken a GX exam, but you have 50-something certs, and my company would pay for more, so I challenged the GPen. So I didn't take 560, I challenged the cert. I passed it by 1%. And I could tell by the way the questions were worded that class had a lot of meat. So I took my first SANS course when I was 27 as well. And I sat with Seth Mesner, and my mind was just like, I couldn't believe how much knowledge was compressed into the courses, because I had been to project management training, Microsoft training, like I'd done all these other courses, and I enjoyed all of them. But I didn't learn so much in 6 days as I did compared to a SANS course. So then ultimately, I pushed myself, became a SANS instructor. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Still is, by the way. And I did that at 30, and then I kept rolling. Now, I'm going to change the timeline here for a second. I just want to show this. This is my certification track. I have 61 certs right now. And I want to share kind of what this looked like. And let's be clear, why I have 61 certs is not because I want 61 certs. It's because someone else was willing to pay for it. And if someone's willing to pay for it, I took them and I just kept taking them because they might help me and they might not. But either way, I didn't pay for most of these. So here's kind of an example. When I was 17, I was at an associate's degree at a local college called Lakeland College. When I attended that, I already knew everything about what they covered in their curriculum. And I'm not bragging, by the way, there. What I'm saying is my brother had basically taught me and motivated me to read books and learn this. So by the time I went at 17, like I've already deployed domain controllers. I already know what SMB is. So college was not challenging for me, but I started at 17, I finished at 19. One of the things I did is I made a deal with the curriculum lead for IT that if I took the Network Plus, that he would basically just let me skip through the class. And he agreed to it. And so I took the Network Plus and paid for that out of pocket, and I got out of that class. So I was motivated to get that. So my first cert was CompTIA Network Plus. At 19, between 17 and 19, I started taking Microsoft exams because the company I was looking at wanted to clean up their Active Directory force and things like that. So as I researched it, I asked them if they would pay for like the MCSA certs, and they did because they were going to benefit from it, and that's how I pitched it. So I had an MCSA by the time I hit there, and then at 19, I signed up for Western Governors University. That was an online self-paced class, and they would let you take a course or challenge an exam. Either way, you had to take the exam. So for me, it was buy books, take the exam, pass it, and not take classes. I did my bachelor's degree in 5.5 months. Now, that's freakishly fast. Yes, I know. But part of the reason was I had broken up with my girlfriend at the time, and I was depressed. And so this was my escape. This is just me kind of opening up. This was my escape from reality to seclude myself, and I used my online degree as an excuse to lock myself in a room. So it really was not a good thing for me, which, by the way, I'm now married to that woman, so I'm happy. But I did it in 5.5 months because I had nothing better to do, and I locked myself in the room. And so I took $2,200 worth of certifications for a degree that cost me $3,300 in 5.5 months, which means the degree really only cost me $1,100. You kind of do the math there. So that's where I got a lot of my certs and a boost early on, just because Western Governors included it in the degree. From there, I kept getting, like at 21, I had 14 certs. Well, that's because I had my MCSE at that point, mainly because of WGU and getting the MCSA from my employer. I started going down security, getting like the ethical hacker early on. By 27, I jumped to 50 certs. And that's because I kept doing what worked. Hey, we're getting ready to do virtualization. I will take that on, but send me to training. Yes, we will. Done. And I kept promising, if you let me do this training and this cert, I'll give you this. And I would literally submit without being asked, give me this training and I'll make sure that you get these things in return. And I calculated every year, here's how much I saved the money by letting me do these things. And so it was, to me, it's social engineering at its finest. So I got all these things. And what really changed my life was in 2013, after I challenged the GPEN, I sat my first SANS course. And from that point forward, I realized after 50 certifications, the number of knowledge I can learn really from the person in the front of the room is greater than most of my other classes. My first class I actually sat was Jason Fossen, 505 Windows. And at this point, I was an MCSE for 2003, 2008, Exchange, Microsoft with security emphasis. Like I had all these things, and I sat Jason's one course, and he just epically blew my mind. Like I'm still shocked, and I still think Fossen knows so much more than I do about Windows. Like, I passed that Windows exam with a 98, I think, and ultimately I was planning on teaching that course for SANS. But that rocked my world. Like, I lived and breathed in Windows, and here is this guy, Jason Fossen, coming up to the classroom, and he just shatters what I think I know by showing me all these new cool things. And so from that point on, I was kind of a SANS man, like SANS training all the way. And I wholeheartedly think it's better than any other training I've ever attended. And that's not me trying to sell my class, because if I did, I'd be promoting me and my classes. And I'm really talking to other classes. So I'm being honest there. And so fast forward, I'm now 34. I have 61 certifications. And the certifications don't matter. Oh. No, Justin, don't say it. They don't matter. That's not the point. I never did all those to get the certs. Someone paid for them, so why wouldn't you? Should you strive for 61 certifications? Absolutely, epically, no, you should not. What you should do instead is try to figure out what's your goal. Like, why do you want to be a cyber defender? Why do you want to go in this career? Like, to me, the certifications were a personal challenge, and I enjoyed it. It was me competing against myself. When I did contract work, let's be clear, I did it because I could get money. Like, some of it is like, I don't know if I can do this, but let's try it. And it was a little contract work here and there and there. Now I own my own company and I do lots of contract work, and it's big bucks. But that was like within the last 3 years. Everything before that was small fish, small jobs. Like, Ismael was working bigger clients, bigger networks than I had ever touched until probably the last 3 years. And he still probably might have much bigger access than I did. Becoming a SANS instructor, I did that because I thought it wasn't possible. And I wanted to see if I could. And I still don't think I'm good enough to be a SANS instructor. I honestly don't. Students say they love me. I've had students say they hate me. That really hurts, by the way. But it was a personal challenge to compete against myself. These are some quotes that I try to live by. The goal is not to be better than the other man, but your previous self. I always have been competing against myself to the point that I don't care if my name is out there. That's not the goal of why I went the route that I went. I just want to be better today than I was yesterday. And I'm a firm believer, I'm a Christian, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. And I love mentoring. I love working with people. Ismael is fantastic. When we're doing updates to our course, the way he words things is because he cares about the students and he wants to give them the best experience he can. I want to work with people like that. I want to share with people who know more than me and people who know less, because I will learn. So early in my career, and I'm going to fast track this just because I know we're coming on the end, I learned almost entirely from books. Back then, I'd buy Microsoft work. I learned how to deploy Microsoft stuff. Lots and lots of books. I still read probably roughly a book a month. Probably one self-help style book a quarter, and then the rest are, usually some IT books or even maybe just some books to relax. I do a lot of lab. I still do some new fun, like Ubuntu 20.04 is coming out. It's not going to be that big of a change over 18.04, but as soon as it comes out, I'm going to download it and deploy it because I want to. So I do a lot of labs. In part 2 of the series, we're going to just show you how to deploy your own whole labs. That's really important. But one of the things you need to keep in mind is set a goal. For me, every year, here's where I want to be a year from now. And if I didn't hit it, I didn't hit it, but I would set that goal and you slowly get there. You don't sprint, you don't burn out, you don't work, like I've always heard, do something every single day and you'll be an expert in the field. No, don't do that. If you want the weekend off to be with your family, have it off. But do a little bit most days and grow. And one of the things that'll help you level up the quickest is finding someone that's smarter than you about something and asking them for help. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. What that just means is surround yourself by people, because everybody knows something you don't. And if it's something you care to learn, you're around the right person because you can ask. Half of being smart is knowing what you were dumb about. I'm really good at that. Ishmael said some of that while he was talking. There are things we know we don't know enough about. So how do you find the answer? You find someone else and you ask them. What sped up my journey to knowing more was I asked. When I took my second SANS course, it was Seth Mesner, the gentleman on this picture. I just walked up to him like, hey, I live in a rural area. I don't know anybody else in the area who's this heavy into security. Population 12,000. Would you mentor me? And I know initially he's like, you're not going to listen to what I'm recommending. But I proved to him I would do what he told me, and he's mentored me ever since, and my growth rate has been exponential. So that's what we want to do with this series is Ishmael and I are going to try where we can to share what helps fast track you as much as we can. And to be honest, after the series, email us, tweet us, because we really do actually care. I want you to be the best you can be, from a family person, like a family man, a family woman, from a cyber defender. And how do you do that? Well, you find balance, and we can share our journeys of what does and doesn't work. We're going to do that in this webcast, but we'll offline with you as well. Clearly, this is also for 530 Defensive Security Architecture and Engineering. That's in a live, online, flexible format where you can take it where Ishmael or I are teaching it the standard 6 days, but virtually, as well as they broke it up into 1, 2, 3, or 6 week courses that are easier for you in the home life because we're stuck at home right now. So if you're interested in that, we'd love to hear from you. We now have full color electronic books. It's fantastic. We've never had that before. And there's a free certification exam if you take the class. But most of all, what I want you to get out of this is we have a 3-part series. The next 2 are going to be very technical. We want to help you grow in all the things a little bit, network, cloud, endpoints, you name it, and we will, but you got to come back for part 2 and part 3, which is free. Follow the link, sign up. We really want to help you. At this point, I know we're slightly over, but I've got time if we can still have some questions. I'm very passionate about this web series. I'd love to hear from you guys. I'd love to help. So Jessica, do we have time for a few questions?
Yeah, we can answer 1 or 2, and then we'll close it out. I'll just do the latest questions. So this would probably be for you, Justin. The question is, would you like to know what specific social engineering certs you took and which you felt were most valuable to you?
So which certifications were the most valuable to me? I mean, that is going to be specific to the job role. Like when I was doing Microsoft projects, it clearly was my MCSE. I don't hold that as much weight as like my GX exams because the difficulty level of them were greater than the MCSE. But for that job role, the MCSE made more sense. Even over like the 505 cert, unless I was doing Windows security, in which case it would be hands down better. I value my GX more than anything else, but the MCSE helped me. The virtualization certifications were very helpful from an infrastructure or virtual desktop side. I always have the joke, I used to be a pimp, but I didn't renew. Project management professional, PMP. That didn't help me at all in my career. I'm an ITIL expert, but nobody ever listened to the ITIL service. So while I got it, the job didn't actually let me do any of those. So I'd say for me personally, it was my Microsoft certs, my VMware certs, and then the security ones like the GX.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's see. I'll do the last question as, do either of you currently mentor anyone?
I'll go first. Yes, I do, and I try to leave that open. Like last year, I actually had where I would have weekly or monthly open calls, and I would have like 8 people on the line, and we just chat as friends, and we try to mentor each other. I had more experience in that group, at least starting off, and I would coach them. And I'm game to do that with anybody. Currently, I have an intern I'm doing that with, as well as some new hires that we're working towards. I personally love mentoring, and I think I learn from them as well. So message me on Twitter, and if you'd like to, we could do like a weekly or monthly Zoom meeting, and I'd be glad to help personally or professionally.
Same here. I actually gave a presentation, similar to this. I'm not sure my come on. A couple of years ago, I was invited by the government of Spain to do a keynote in my home country, my hometown actually, and I shared a lot of these things and all the details. And I've been receiving. That's why I said, right, a lot of the audience was actually high school guys, and I've received emails since like, hey, your talk inspired me. I want to do this. How do I get started? What do I do? So maybe, I don't know, maybe we can formalize something, right? Maybe we formalize that Zoom call and it's like once every, I don't know, 2 months or something like that, or we do something.
Yeah, I would be totally game. And Ishmael, it'd be good for us to partner up too, because we think differently, and that's very good. So I guess, why don't you, if you're interested in that, tweet both of us, and maybe we'll formally announce something on Twitter and let folks join. And I would like that.
Blue team mentoring sessions, all around Defender mentoring sessions.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Thank you. And I have some audience members. They're wondering about the next webcast in the series. Do you have a slide on that? Or do you know the dates you can mention?
I don't have the dates memorized, but it is on the slide. Actually, let me just see if I can open that.
We're going to be sharing that.
They're already online, but we will be tweeting those out.
Exactly.
I guess
we're going to be sharing that
for the course. We'll tweet that out here after that we end this, because the dates are already live. I just don't have them memorized.
Okay, I just put a link, so anyone that's wanting to see the other 2 parts to the series, you can visit sans.org/webcast. And so that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you to our speakers, Ismael and Justin, for that great presentation, which helps brings this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcast. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.